Marcus was 37 years old, a licensed electrician earning a steady $58,000 a year. And he knew, with the chilling certainty of a man who has touched a live wire, that his marriage was over. The feeling didn't arrive with a shout, but with a quiet, sickening hum in the back of his mind. It was the low-frequency dread he'd been living with for 6 years, ever since his mother-in-law, Loretta, had turned to his new bride at their own wedding reception. Her voice a stage whisper meant for the whole table to hear, and said, "Chloe, darling, I love you, but you just married your worst decision." The devastating situation wasn't just that single, exquisitely cruel sentence. It was the 6 years of echoes that followed. It was every holiday dinner in her $1.3 million River Oaks townhome. And every condescending question about his work, every time she introduced him as Chloe's husband, with a tone that suggested it was a temporary, unfortunate condition. Marcus, a man whose deep brown skin seemed to absorb the light and whose hands could rewire a city block, had learned to become small in her presence. He would smile his quiet smile, his broad shoulders hunched just slightly, a gesture of deference he hated himself for. He did it for Chloe. He did it because he loved his wife more than he loathed her mother. But the final, fatal shock came not from Loretta's mouth, but from a sterile piece of paper. A document that proved her contempt wasn't just a social poison, it was a financial one. She hadn't just insulted his pride, she had conspired to steal his future. Beyond, and as Marcus stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the county clerk's office, holding the proof of betrayal, the quiet hum of dread in his soul finally went silent. It was replaced by the cold, clear certainty of a circuit breaker tripping. The power had just been cut. He had no idea at the time, but in that sterile, quiet government building, he was about to make a decision of his own, one that would make Loretta's words taste like ash in her mouth. He had spent 6 years being their worst decision. Now they were about to find out what his best one looked like. Have you ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to be family? It's a unique kind of pain, one that carves you out from the inside. We'd love to hear your story in the comments below, because sharing can be the first step to taking your power back. The early years with Chloe were a study in contrasts. Their life together, in a modest but tidy 2-bedroom rental in Acres Homes, was built on a foundation of simple, tangible love. Marcus would leave for work at 5:30 a.m., but not before making a pot of coffee and leaving a single cup on Chloe's nightstand, exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. His work truck, a 2014 Ford F-150 with 150,000 miles on it, was filled with over $10,000 worth of tools he'd accumulated over a decade, each one paid for in cash. He was proud of what he built with his hands. Chloe, a graphic designer who worked from home, would pack his lunch, a turkey sandwich on wheat, an apple, and a small bag of chips, a daily ritual that cost maybe $4 but felt priceless. Their evenings were quiet. They'd watch shows on their 5-year-old, a $400 Vizio television, sharing a bowl of popcorn. On weekends, Marcus worked on the small garden he'd planted in their backyard, coaxing tomatoes and peppers from the Houston soil. He'd come inside, his hands caked with dirt, his $200 Red Wing boots left by the door, and Chloe would wrap her arms around his neck, not caring about the sweat on his brow. Her love felt like the solid ground beneath his feet. She was a gentle soul, her creativity a soft light in his practical world. Her deep brown skin was luminous, especially when she smiled, and her laughter was the sound he worked to hear every day. She was the reason he tolerated the other side of their life, the world of Loretta. That world was located just 20 minutes away by car, but might as well have been on another planet. Loretta's townhome in River Oaks was a 3-story monument to her husband's success in oil and gas. The front door alone probably cost more than Marcus's entire tool collection. Inside, the air was different, cool, still, and smelling faintly of expensive lilies and floor polish. Every object had a silent, intimidating price tag. The abstract painting in the foyer was a $30,000 commission. The crystal glasses they used for water cost $250 each. Loretta herself was always impeccably dressed, favoring $4,000 Chanel suits and carrying a $6,000 Hermes Birkin bag, even just to go to the grocery store. Family dinners were a weekly ordeal. Marcus, in his best $150 Ralph Lauren polo shirt, would sit at the massive mahogany dining table, feeling like a fly in a spider's web. Loretta's husband, Robert, was a quiet, almost invisible man who seemed worn down by the sheer force of his wife's personality. He was kind to Marcus in a distant way, but Loretta set the tone. "Marcus, is that work dirt under your fingernails?" she'd ask, holding her wine glass aloft. "I keep telling Chloe you should get an office job. All that manual labor is so undignified." Marcus would clench his jaw and look at Chloe, who would give him a small, apologetic smile. For her, he'd swallow the insult. For her, he'd pretend not to notice the way Loretta would subtly wipe her hand after shaking his. He told himself it was just her way, that her sharp edges were a product of a world he didn't understand. He loved Chloe, and Chloe loved her mother. So, for the sake of peace, he absorbed the little shocks, never realizing they were part of a much larger, deliberate current of contempt. He had no idea how deeply that current ran, or that it was designed to sweep him away entirely. The campaign of 1,000 cuts began on their first anniversary. Loretta had insisted on hosting a party at the River Oaks townhome. She'd hired a catering company for $8,000 and invited 50 of her closest friends, all of whom seemed to be cut from the same expensive cloth. Marcus stood awkwardly by the bar, nursing a beer, while Chloe was swept into conversations about European vacations and new Teslas. Loretta glided through the room, a shark in a $2,400 Burberry dress. She stopped beside Marcus, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "You look a little lost," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It must be overwhelming, so different from, well, you know." Marcus forced a smile. "It's a great party, Loretta. You really outdid yourself." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, this is nothing. Just a little get-together. I was telling Chloe, now that she's married, you two should really think about your future. You can't live in that little rental forever. It's not a good look." She gestured vaguely towards a group of men in expensive suits. "Image is everything in our world, Marcus. You're an extension of this family now. People are watching." The implication was clear. He was a stain on their perfect image. Later that night, Chloe tried to smooth it over. "She doesn't mean it like it sounds, honey. She just worries." But Marcus saw the flicker of doubt in his wife's eyes. The seed had been planted. The second year, it was about his job. They were at another one of Loretta's dinner parties. One of her friends, a real estate mogul named Arthur, was talking about a new high-rise project. He turned to Marcus. "Loretta tells me you're in construction?" Before Marcus could answer, Loretta chimed in. "He's an electrician, a very hands-on one." She said the words hands-on, as if describing a communicable disease. Arthur nodded slowly. "Right. Trade work, good, honest work." He said it with the kind of dismissive praise one might offer a child for a clumsy drawing. Marcus felt his face grow hot. He was a master electrician. He'd completed a grueling 5-year apprenticeship, passed a state board exam, and was responsible for the complex electrical systems that powered buildings like the one Arthur was bragging about. He earned every cent of his $58,000 salary, often working 60-hour weeks. But in this room, Surrounded by men who made money by moving numbers on a screen, he was made to feel like a simple laborer. "It's a good trade," Marcus said, his voice level. "Someone has to keep the lights on in all these fancy buildings." The table went quiet. Loretta shot him a look of pure venom. "Well, aren't you witty tonight?" she said, her voice dripping with ice. The conversation quickly moved on, leaving Marcus isolated once again. The humiliations grew bolder. By the 4th year of their marriage, Marcus and Chloe had saved up a respectable down payment for a house. It was mostly his savings, carefully squirreled away from side jobs he took on weekends, totaling nearly $40,000. They found a beautiful small starter home, a 1950s bungalow in the Garden Oaks neighborhood, listed for $280,000. It needed some work, but it was theirs. When they told Loretta, she didn't even pretend to be happy. They were sitting in her immaculate living room, on a white sofa that probably cost $15,000. "Garden Oaks?" she sniffed. "Chloe, darling, that's practically the suburbs." "And a fixer-upper? Marcus, can you even afford the mortgage on your salary?" She drew out the word salary as if it were a foreign, unpleasant term. "We can, Loretta," Marcus said firmly. "We've saved, and we've been pre-approved." "Pre-approved?" she scoffed. "That doesn't mean anything. What you two need is a proper home, something with a good address." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "I have an idea. Your father and I have been meaning to invest in more property. What if we help you? We could buy a place, a nice town home near us, and you could live there. It would be a family asset." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Oh, Mommy, would you?" Marcus felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "Loretta, we want to buy our own place, something that's ours." "Don't be silly, Marcus," Loretta said, waving a dismissive hand. "This is a much smarter financial decision. You wouldn't have to worry about a mortgage. We'll put it in a family LLC. It protects the asset. It's just smart business." He saw the trap immediately. It wouldn't be their home. It would be hers. Another tool for her to control them. "No," he said, the word coming out sharper than he intended. "Thank you for the offer, Loretta, but no. We're buying the bungalow." Loretta's face hardened. She turned to her daughter, her voice softening into a manipulative purr. "Chloe, honey, don't you see? He's letting his pride get in the way of a wonderful opportunity. This is about setting you up for life, not about his feelings." Chloe looked from her mother to her husband, her expression torn. "He's right, Mom. We want to do this on our own." They bought the bungalow, but it was a hollow victory. Loretta's disapproval hung over it like a storm cloud. She would visit and point out every flaw. "That crack in the ceiling is just dreadful." "Are you sure the wiring is safe, Marcus? Maybe you should hire a professional." It was a constant, grinding assault on his competence, his manhood, his worth. The final, most vicious betrayal came during their 6th year of marriage. The bungalow they had bought for $280,000 was now, and thanks to a booming market and the sweat equity Marcus had poured into it, a new kitchen he'd installed himself for $15,000 in materials, a completely rewired electrical system, a landscaped backyard, worth nearly $500,000. They had over $214,000 in equity. It was their nest egg, their future. It was the tangible proof that Marcus had been a good decision, not a bad one. One Tuesday, Chloe came home from having lunch with her mother, looking pale and anxious. She sat Marcus down at the very kitchen table he had built. "Honey," she began, twisting a napkin in her hands, "Mom and I were talking today about finances." Marcus felt the familiar dread. "Okay." "Dad hasn't been well," she said, which was true. Robert's health was declining. and Mom is worried about protecting their assets for the future. But for us, protecting them from what? Estate taxes, creditors, all sorts of things. Her financial advisor suggested they move more assets into family LLCs. It's the smart thing to do. She paused, taking a shaky breath. She wants us to put the house into one of the LLCs. Marcus stared at her. Chloe, no. We've been over this. This house is ours. It's in both our names. He had made a point of that when they bought it, a symbol of their partnership, or so he thought. I know, she said quickly. But it's just a legal structure, baby. Nothing would change. We'd still live here. It just protects the equity. For us. Mom said it's the only way to make sure her inheritance is secure. And since this house is part of our financial picture, it needs to be included. It's for our family. It's for her family, Marcus corrected, his voice dangerously quiet. It's about her control. That's not fair, Chloe cried, tears welling in her eyes. She's trying to help us. Why do you always have to be so proud, so difficult? She said you'd be like this. She said your pride would be our downfall. The words hit him like a physical blow. She said you'd be like this. They had already discussed his reaction. He was a predictable problem to be managed. This is our home, Chloe, our equity, the money I earned and the work I did with my own two hands. And the money my parents gave us, she shot back. Loretta had given them a $10,000 housewarming gift that she never failed to mention. Compared to the $40,000 he'd saved and the countless hours of labor he'd invested, it was a drop in the bucket. But Loretta had polished that drop until it shone like a diamond, though they argued for hours. It was the worst fight of their marriage. Marcus pleaded with her to see the manipulation, to see that this wasn't about protection, it was about possession. But Loretta's influence was too strong. 6 years of subtle poisoning had done its work. Chloe saw her husband's resistance not as wisdom, but as stubborn pride, just as her mother had framed it. In the end, exhausted and heartbroken, Marcus gave in with a single, fateful sentence. I will not sign anything that puts my home in your mother's control. He believed that was the end of it. He believed his wife, despite her weakness, would never go behind his back. He had no idea how wrong he was. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon at 2:17 p.m. Marcus was on a job site, rewiring a commercial kitchen in a new restaurant downtown. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was an unknown number with a local area code. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Is this Marcus Thorne? A professional-sounding female voice asked. This is he. Mr. Thorne, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a loan processor with Apex Title Company. We're handling a home equity line of credit application for you, and we've run into a bit of a snag with the title search. Marcus pulled a glove off with his teeth, confused. A line of credit? I haven't applied for any line of credit? There was a pause on the other end. Oh. Well, this application is for the property at 1254 Cedar Creek Drive. The application is under the name of the Ashwood Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing to him. That's my address, but I don't know anything about that LLC. My wife and I own that home. I see, Sarah said, her voice now cautious. Well, that's the first issue. The title on record was transferred to Ashwood Holdings LLC 6 months ago. The second issue is that the original deed we have on file from the purchase lists the grantee as Marcus Thorne, a single man. Another pause. But the transfer deed to the LLC is signed only by a Chloe Thorne. We flagged it because there's a discrepancy. We can't proceed without clarifying the chain of title. We need your signature on a quitclaim, or we need to understand why you weren't on the transfer. The noise of the construction site faded away. The buzz of a sawzall, the clang of metal, the shouts of other workers. It all dissolved into a low hum in his ears. Marcus Thorne, a single man. He remembered it clearly. May he had bought the house a week before their wedding. His mortgage broker had advised it would be simpler to get the loan approved on his credit alone, and they could add Chloe to the deed later. They had signed the papers to add her name a month after the wedding. He was sure of it. Transferred to Ashwood Holdings, LLC 6 months ago. Signed only by a Chloe Thorne. The fight. The argument where he had said, "I will not sign anything." "Mr. Thorne, are you still there?" "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice a rasp. "I'm here." "Can you email me what you have?" "Of course. What's your email address?" He gave it to her, his hand trembling slightly as he hung up. He walked off the job site telling his foreman he felt sick, which was the truest thing he'd said all day. He drove his Ford F-150 not home, but to the Harris County Clerk's office downtown. The drive was a blur. The glass towers of the city seemed to lean in, mocking him with their cold, reflective surfaces. They were Loretta's world, not his. At 3:42 p.m., he was standing at a public records terminal, his heart pounding against his ribs. He typed in his own address. The screen populated with a list of documents. There it was, Deed of Trust 2018, Grantee Marcus Thorne. Good. Then another one. Special Warranty Deed 2018, the one adding Chloe. He clicked on it. His signature was there, beside hers. He felt a moment of relief. Then he saw the next entry, dated 7 months ago. Special Warranty Deed. He clicked the link. The document loaded, a scanned image of the official paper. His blood ran cold. The grantor, Chloe Thorne. A married woman. The grantee, Ashwood Holdings, LLC. And at the bottom, a single, elegant signature, Chloe's. His was nowhere to be found. They had gone behind his back. Chloe had signed away their home, his home, based on a lie from her mother. But the lie was deeper than he imagined. He scrolled back to the deed where he'd added her name. He looked closely at the date. Then he looked at the date on the new deed to the LLC. He realized Sarah from the title company had been wrong about one thing. Chloe hadn't signed as a married woman acting alone. She had found a notary, likely one of her mother's connections, who had looked at the original deed, the one that said Marcus Thorne, a single man, and ignored the subsequent deed adding Chloe. Or perhaps they had hidden that second deed. And they had structured the transfer as if Chloe were the sole owner, a lie built on a half-truth, and pushed it through. They had gambled that no one would ever look closely. They had gambled that Marcus, the simple electrician, was too stupid to ever find out. He printed a copy of the deed to the LLC. The paper felt strangely heavy in his hand, thick with the weight of the betrayal. He paid the $2 fee in cash, his movements stiff and robotic. He walked out of the building into the humid Houston air, the sun obscured by gathering rain clouds. He felt a single, cold drop hit his cheek. Or maybe it was a tear. He couldn't tell the difference. In that moment, the man who had loved Chloe with a quiet, steady devotion was gone. In his place was a man with a piece of paper, a cold fury, and a very, very clear purpose. The hardest part was going home. The bungalow he had poured his soul into now felt like a crime scene. Every nail he had hammered, every wall he had painted seemed to mock him. He walked through the door at 6:15 p.m. to the smell of his favorite meal, smothered pork chops. Chloe was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts, her beautiful, coily hair tied up in a colorful scarf. She looked like the woman he had fallen in love with. She was a stranger. "Hey, baby," she said, turning to kiss him. Her lips were warm. He felt nothing. "You're home late. Tough day?" "Yeah," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Long one." He put his keys, worn smooth from years of use, into the $20 ceramic bowl they kept on the entryway table. Beside it was a framed photo of their wedding day. They both looked so happy, so naive. Something came up. He had to play dumb. He knew it instinctively. Any confrontation now would only give them time to cover their tracks, to lawyer up, to spin a new web of lies. Loretta had underestimated him his entire life. He needed her to keep underestimating him just a little while longer. That night, as they lay in their bed, a sturdy oak frame he'd bought for $800 after they first moved in, Chloe snuggled against him. "Is everything okay, Marcus? You seem quiet." He stared at the ceiling, at the faint shadows cast by the streetlights outside. "Just tired, thinking about a big project at work." It was a lie, the first of many he would have to tell. Each one felt like a small betrayal of the man he used to be, but they were necessary. He was gathering ammunition. A week later, Loretta called to invite them to Sunday dinner. It was a command, not an invitation. Marcus went, the printed deed folded neatly in the inside pocket of his jacket, a cold reminder against his chest. He sat at the mahogany table, eating a $200 roast beef that tasted like sawdust, and listened to Loretta talk. "I was just on the phone with our financial advisor, Bernard," she announced to the table, though her words were clearly aimed at Marcus. "He is so brilliant. He was just saying how glad he is that we got all our assets properly structured. He says the market is volatile, and the only people who will be safe are the ones who planned ahead." She looked directly at Marcus, a smug, knowing smile on her face. "It pays to listen to experts, doesn't it?" "It sure does," Marcus said, meeting her gaze. He took a slow sip of water from the $250 crystal glass. "Smart planning is everything." He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes at his easy agreement. She had expected a fight. He gave her a placid smile instead. Chloe reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it in gratitude. She thought he was finally coming around. He squeezed back, a hollow gesture. The next phase of his plan required him to become an actor. He needed more evidence, specifically about the LLC. One evening, feigning curiosity, he brought it up with Chloe. They were washing dishes together, a familiar domestic ritual that now felt like a scene from a play. "You know," he started, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary, "I was thinking about what your mom said, about that LLC. Ashwood Holdings, was it?" Chloe stiffened. "Oh, yes? Why?" "I was just curious how it works. Is it complicated? All that legal stuff is way over my head." He played the part she and her mother had cast for him, the simple, clueless husband. It worked. Chloe, relieved, began to explain. "Oh, it's not that bad. Mom's lawyer handled everything, a man named Mr. Sterling. He just drew up the papers, and I had to go to a notary and sign them. It links the house to Mom's main family trust. It's really just for tax purposes." "Sterling," Marcus repeated, filing the name away. "And he set up the LLC?" "Yes, he handles all of their corporate filings. He's been with the family for years." She smiled, believing she was educating him. "See? It's all very professional. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about," Marcus echoed. He had a name. Hey, he had a motive, linking it to the family trust. He had the deed. The pieces were coming together. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. He was cleaning out the glove compartment of Chloe's car, a 2020 Lexus RX she'd received as a birthday gift from her parents, a $45,000 gesture of control, looking for an insurance card. Tucked in the back of the owner's manual, he found a folded piece of paper. It was an invoice from a notary public, dated 7 months ago. The charge was $50 for real estate document services. Stapled to it was a business card. The notary's office was in a high-rise on Post Oak Boulevard, the same building that housed dozens of oil and gas firms and corporate lawyers. This wasn't some random UPS store notary. This was a professional, someone who knew how to handle sensitive documents. And at the bottom of the invoice, in the notes section, was a handwritten line. Per instructions from L. Covington. Loretta Covington. She hadn't just advised Chloe. She had directed the entire operation. She had hired the lawyer, instructed the notary, and guided her daughter's hand as she signed away her husband's home. Marcus took a photo of the invoice with his phone. The screen glowed in the dim light of the garage. He now had a direct link from the fraudulent deed straight to Loretta. The chain of evidence was complete. He closed the glove compartment with a soft, final click. The time for playing dumb was almost over. The following Monday at 9 a.m., Marcus was not at a job site. He was sitting in a leather chair that probably cost $3,000 in a 40th floor office with a panoramic view of the Houston skyline. The view was wasted on him. His focus was entirely on the man across the desk. His name was David Chen, a partner at a boutique law firm specializing in real estate fraud. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s, with a reputation for being a shark. Marcus had found him after 3 days of obsessive research, and the initial consultation fee of $500 had felt like the best money he'd ever spent. On the polished mahogany desk between them, Marcus had laid out his evidence in a neat, damning row. The original deed, showing him as the sole owner before the marriage. The second deed, adding Chloe after the wedding. The fraudulent third deed, transferring the property to Ashwood Holdings, LLC, signed only by Chloe. The printout of the LLC's incorporation filing, which he'd paid $50 for online. The photo of the notary's invoice, with Loretta's name on it. David Chen, who billed at a formidable $850 per hour, examined each document with a focused intensity. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the quiet rustle of paper. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice calm and precise, "you have been the victim of a conspiracy to commit real estate fraud?" The words, stark and legal, validated everything Marcus had been feeling. It wasn't just a family squabble or a betrayal of trust. It was a crime. "Your mother-in-law and your wife have made several critical and, frankly, amateur mistakes," Chen continued, tapping a finger on the LLC filing. "First, they had their lawyer, this Mr. Sterling, and file the articles of incorporation for Ashwood Holdings, LLC, 1 week before your wedding date." He slid the paper across the desk. "See the timestamp? This LLC legally existed before your marriage. That makes it Loretta's separate property, not a marital entity." Marcus stared at the date. It was true. A small, crucial detail they had overlooked in their arrogance. "Second," Chen went on, picking up the fraudulent deed, "they had your wife sign this as Chloe Thorne, basing her authority on the original deed where you were listed as a single man. They completely ignored the subsequent deed where you added her. This creates a fatal flaw in the chain of title. She did not have the legal authority to transfer 100% of the property. At best, she could only transfer her 50% interest. But even that is debatable, since the transfer was done under false pretenses." He tented his fingers. "But here is the most important part. The ace up your sleeve." He held up the very first deed. "You purchased this property as a single man. It was your separate property before you married. When you added your wife's name to the deed after the wedding, you made a gift to the marital estate. However, the fraudulent transfer she executed was designed to sever your interest entirely, based on a document that was no longer the most current deed of record. This is not just improper, it's textbook fraud." Marcus felt a surge of cold, clear power. So what can we do? We have two paths, Chen explained. The loud path is to file a lawsuit for fraud, quiet title, and conspiracy. It would be public, messy, and very expensive. It would likely take years. He paused. Or there's the quiet path, the one I recommend. What's the quiet path? We leverage their mistakes. We draft a demand letter to your wife, your mother-in-law, and their attorney, Mr. Sterling. We lay out the evidence of fraud, including the predated LLC and the illegal transfer. We point out that Mr. Sterling could be facing disbarment for his role in this. We point out that your wife and mother-in-law could be facing criminal charges. Chen leaned forward. And we offer them a simple way out. They sign a document immediately dissolving the transfer to the LLC, voiding it as if it never happened. They sign a full release of any and all claims to the property. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges or report them to the state bar. It's a clean, swift, and silent execution. The lawyer's words were like music. Accountability, not just revenge. There's one more step, Chen added. While this is happening, we get you pre-approved for a cash-out refinance on the property based on its current market value of, what did you say, about $500,000? That's right, Marcus said. Good. The refinance will be in your name alone. Once the fraudulent deed is voided, the title will revert to you and your wife. You will then have her sign a quitclaim deed as part of your divorce settlement, giving you the house. The cash from the refinance will be used to buy out her 50% share of the marital equity, the equity accumulated after you added her to the deed. We'll calculate it to the penny. It will be fair, it will be legal, and it will be final. You will walk away with the house, IALTAS, a new mortgage in your name, and your freedom. They will walk away with their reputations intact, which, I suspect, is the only thing they truly value. Marcus thought about the $214,000 in equity. Giving half of it to Chloe felt like rewarding her for the betrayal. He voiced his concern. Chen nodded. I understand. But the law sees that marital equity as shared. By offering her the buyout, you are taking the high ground. You are being scrupulously fair, which makes you unimpeachable. It removes any argument she could have in a divorce proceeding. We're not just winning the battle. We're winning the war in a way that can never be questioned. He named his retainer, a flat fee of $25,000 to handle everything. It was half of Marcus's life savings, but it was a small price to pay to reclaim his life. Do it, Marcus said, his voice firm. Let's take the quiet path. He wrote the check for the $25,000 retainer right then and there. As he signed his name, his hand was perfectly steady. For the first time in 6 years, he felt the solid ground beneath his feet again. He was no longer the victim. He was the strategist, and they had no idea what was coming. The strike was not a single, dramatic explosion. It was a series of quiet, precise, and devastatingly effective actions, executed over the course of 1 week. It began on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. sharp. While Marcus was on a job site installing a $15,000 custom lighting system in a River Oaks mansion not 5 blocks from Loretta's townhome, David Chen was setting the plan in motion. 3 identical letters were sent out via certified mail with return receipt requested. One was addressed to Chloe Thorne at their home in Garden Oaks. One was addressed to Loretta Covington at her townhome in River Oaks. The third and most potent was addressed to Mr. Franklin Sterling at his law office on Post Oak Boulevard. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, 3 pages of cold, hard facts. It began politely, referencing the purported transfer of the property at 1254 Cedar Creek Drive. It then methodically laid out the undisputed timeline, Marcus's purchase as a single man, the creation of the Ashwood Holdings LLC before the marriage, and the subsequent fraudulent transfer signed only by Chloe, based on an outdated deed. It cited the specific Texas statutes that had been violated regarding fraudulent conveyance and securing execution of a document by deception. A paragraph in the middle of the second page was dedicated to Mr. Sterling. It noted his professional obligation to verify the chain of title and the signing authority of the grantor. It pointed out that his participation in a transaction based on a superseded deed, especially when the LLC's creation date so clearly indicated a scheme to circumvent marital property laws, constituted a severe breach of ethical duty. The letter mentioned, in passing, the State Bar of Texas Grievance Committee. The final page contained the offer, which was presented as a non-negotiable demand. The recipients had 72 hours to sign the attached deed of rescission and release. This document would declare the transfer to Ashwood Holdings LLC null and void ab initio from the beginning. It would also release any and all future claims on the property by Chloe, Loretta, or any of their affiliated entities. The letter concluded by stating that if the signed documents were not on David Chen's desk by the deadline, his office was fully prepared to file a civil petition for fraud and to forward our findings to the Harris County District Attorney's Office for their review. The first reaction came from Chloe. She had been home when the mail carrier arrived, requiring her signature for the certified letter. Marcus had arranged to be out of the house, working late. At 2:48 p.m., his phone started vibrating. It was Chloe. He let it go to voicemail. Her message was breathless and confused. "Marcus? Hi, baby. I just got this really weird letter from a lawyer. Some guy named David Chen. It's about the house. It's full of all this legal stuff I don't understand. Something about fraud. It must be a mistake. Call me back as soon as you get this. It's really scary." He saved the voicemail. An hour later, at 3:55 p.m., another voicemail. This time her voice was tight with panic. "Marcus, I talked to Mom. She got one too. And she called Mr. Sterling. He's furious. He said we have a huge problem. Marcus, what did you do? Why would you go to a lawyer? You were supposed to talk to me. Call me. Now." He saved that one too. The shift from confusion to accusation was telling. The main event, however, was Loretta. Marcus could only imagine the scene when the certified letter arrived at the $1.3 million townhome, interrupting her afternoon routine of phone calls and online shopping. Her reaction was not a voicemail. It was a direct, furious phone call at 4:10 p.m. Marcus, sitting in his truck in a quiet park, took a deep breath and answered. "What is the meaning of this?" Loretta's voice was a shriek, stripped of all its practiced elegance. "What is this disgusting, threatening letter? Who is David Chen? How dare you?" Marcus held the phone slightly away from his ear. He said nothing. "You are trying to blackmail us. My lawyer will tear this pathetic man to shreds. You think you can threaten me? You, a common laborer? After everything we've done for you, for Chloe, we gave you a life you could only dream of." Marcus finally spoke, his voice so calm it was chilling. "Loretta, did you read the whole letter?" "I read your disgusting lies. This is slander." "Did you get to the part about the State Bar Grievance Committee?" Marcus asked quietly. "Or the part about the district attorney's office? I'm told real estate fraud is a state jail felony in Texas?" There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end of the line. He could hear her breathing, ragged and fast. She had been prepared for a shouting match, for him to be emotional and irrational. She was not prepared for this cold, surgical precision. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice suddenly losing all its bluster. "You would ruin Chloe's life? You would send your own wife's mother to jail?" "Chloe is my wife," Marcus said, the words like chips of ice. "You are the one who convinced her to commit a felony to steal my home. You are the one who put her in this position. You told her I was her worst decision. You have 6 years of contempt to answer for, Loretta. This is the bill," he continued, his voice unwavering. "My lawyer, Mr. Chen, is not pathetic. He is very, very good at his job. And he has advised me that you have a simple choice. You can sign the papers, and this all goes away quietly. Or you can refuse. And we can all find out just how brilliant Mr. Sterling is when he's trying to defend the indefensible in a court of law and in front of a disciplinary board. The choice is yours. You have until Friday at 10 a.m. He hung up the phone. He didn't wait for a reply. The silence in his truck was absolute. The power dynamic, so carefully cultivated by Loretta over 6 long years, had just been reversed with a single 15-minute phone call. The final piece of the strike was the signature. On Friday morning at 9:30 a.m., a full 30 minutes before the deadline, a courier delivered a package to David Chen's office. It contained the rescission documents, signed by Chloe, Loretta, and a very humbled Franklin Sterling. At 11 a.m., Marcus walked into a title company office, a different one, vetted by Chen, and sat down at a long, empty table. In front of him was a stack of documents for his new cash-out refinance loan. The loan was for $350,000 in his name only. The loan officer pointed to the final signature line on the new deed. It listed the grantee as Marcus Thorne, a single man. He picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly, a dark, definitive line. It was the quietest, most powerful word he had ever spoken. The consequences did not arrive all at once. They cascaded one after another, like a row of dominoes set in motion by the stroke of his pen. The first to fall was the legal structure Loretta had so arrogantly constructed. The moment the signed deed of rescission was filed with the Harris County Clerk, Ashwood Holdings LLC lost its only asset. The transfer was legally voided, erased from the public record as if it had never existed. The LLC, which Loretta had created for the sole purpose of capturing Marcus's home, was now an empty shell, a monument to her failed scheme. David Chen later discovered that Loretta's husband, Robert, upon learning of the fraud and the near-criminal exposure, had forced her to dissolve the LLC entirely. The cost of setting it up and then dissolving it, including Mr. Sterling's fees, was estimated at around $15,000, a small but satisfying financial sting. The second consequence was the clawback of the equity. The house, which had reverted to joint ownership between Marcus and Chloe for a brief, technical moment, was now his. As part of their immediate divorce proceedings, which Chloe did not contest, the marital equity had to be divided. The house was appraised at $502,000. Their original mortgage balance was $240,000. The total equity was $262,000. However, Chen argued successfully that Marcus's original $40,000 down payment was his separate property. That left $222,000 in true marital equity to be split. Chloe's share was $111,000. This amount was paid to her directly from the proceeds of Marcus's new $350,000 mortgage. She received a check, and in return she signed the final quitclaim deed, extinguishing her name from the title forever. For Loretta, this was the ultimate defeat. The $214,000 in equity she had tried to steal for her family trust was gone. More than she had been forced to watch as over $100,000 of it was handed over, legally and fairly, because of the very scheme she had concocted. The third consequence was perhaps the most personal for Loretta. Her husband, Robert, was a quiet man, but he was not a fool. when he learned the full extent of Loretta's deception from a furious David Chen, who made sure to inadvertently copy Robert on a follow-up email, he was appalled, not just at the fraud, but at the risk she had exposed the entire family to. He saw that her obsession with social standing and control had nearly led to criminal charges and public disgrace. Their arguments, as reported to Chloe, who then tearfully relayed them to Marcus in a final pleading phone call, were titanic. A month after the divorce was finalized, Chloe told Marcus that her father had called his own attorney and made a significant change to his will. Loretta was not disinherited entirely, but she was removed as the primary executor of his substantial estate. More pointedly, a specific clause was added, stating that any assets designated for Chloe would be placed in a trust managed not by Loretta, but by a neutral third-party bank. Robert had lost all faith in his wife's judgment. He had, in his own quiet way, taken Marcus's side. Loretta had lost control over her daughter's financial future, the very thing she claimed to be protecting. The price tag on that loss was immeasurable. The social fallout was just as severe. News in a place like River Oaks travels through whispers. Though the details were kept private, the sudden divorce, the dissolution of the LLC, and the whispers of a near disbarment for a well-known lawyer were enough to create a story. Loretta's friends noticed her strained appearance at charity luncheons. They saw the cracks in her perfect facade. Her power, which was built on an image of untouchable success and savvy, was diminished. She had been outmaneuvered by the one person she had dismissed as insignificant. The common laborer had proven to be the smarter strategist. The humiliation was a private, burning shame she had to live with every day. For Chloe, the consequences were a sad, quiet unraveling. She took the $111,000 and moved into a small, generic apartment complex. She had the money, but she had lost her home, her husband, and her moral compass. The man who made her coffee every morning was gone. The simple, authentic life she'd had was replaced by a sterile existence, caught between a mother she could no longer fully trust and a husband she had irrevocably betrayed. Marcus heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had stopped taking her mother's calls for a while, a small rebellion that came 6 years too late. Their love story was the final casualty, a tragic and unnecessary loss. Marcus mourned the woman he had married, but he could not forgive the woman she had become. 2 years passed. The rain of that awful discovery had long since given way to the steady, warm Houston sunlight. Marcus's life had been rebuilt, not on the shifting sands of someone else's approval, but on a foundation of his own making. The house on Cedar Creek Drive was no longer just a structure of wood and nails. It was his sanctuary. The garden in the backyard was thriving, overflowing with tomatoes, okra, and peppers. The scent of turned earth and growing things was the first thing he smelled in the morning. He had kept the house, but he had transformed it. The new mortgage payment was higher, but manageable. He had taken on more side work, his reputation for quality and integrity spreading by word of mouth. His income had increased to over $75,000 a year. But the most significant change was not financial. It was a project he started in his own 2-car garage. It was called the Thorne Electrical Apprenticeship Program. Every Saturday morning, 6 young men and women from the Acres Homes community, the same neighborhood where Marcus had once rented, would gather in his garage. They were kids who, like him, were good with their hands and looking for a direction. He had invested $5,000 of his own money to buy them each a basic toolkit, a Klein tool set that cost about $300 each, and a copy of the National Electrical Code. He taught them the difference between amperage and voltage, how to bend conduit, how to read a schematic. He taught them the physics behind the work, but more than that, he taught them the pride of the trade. He showed them that building something tangible, something real, had a worth that couldn't be measured by a stock portfolio or a fancy address. He was giving them not just a skill, but a future. He saw the same spark of potential in their eyes that a teacher had once seen in his. The program was his true resolution, his way of turning the poison of Loretta's contempt into medicine for his community. One crisp Saturday in October, while as he was showing a young woman named Keisha how to wire a three-way switch, a sleek white BMW 3 Series, a car that cost at least $43,000, pulled up to the curb. Loretta stepped out. She looked older, smaller. The designer suit she wore, a pale gray Chanel knockoff, seemed to hang on her. She stood on the sidewalk, watching the activity in the garage, a place of honest work and loud, happy chatter. Marcus saw her but didn't stop what he was doing. He finished explaining the concept of a traveler wire to Keisha, whose face was lit with concentration and understanding. Finally, he wiped his hands on a rag and walked down the driveway. "Loretta," he said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus," she began, her voice thin. I wanted to see Chloe. I heard she was... I'm sorry, I came to the wrong place." It was a lie, and they both knew it. This was a pilgrimage of defeat. "She doesn't live here anymore," Marcus said, his voice devoid of anger. He felt nothing but a distant pity. Loretta looked past him, at the garage, at the young people learning, building. She saw the neat rows of tools on the pegboard, the coils of wire, the earnest expressions. She saw a world of value she had never been able to recognize. "You told me I was Chloe's worst decision," Marcus said, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. He was holding up a mirror to her past. "You were wrong. My worst decision was tolerating your disrespect for 6 years. My best decision was deciding to stop." Tears welled in Loretta's eyes, real tears this time. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Marcus gave a slight nod. He accepted the apology not for her, but for himself. It was the final circuit, closing. "I hope you find some peace, Loretta." He turned and walked back to his garage, back to his students, back to the life he had built. He didn't look back. The sound of the BMW's engine starting and fading down the street was just another noise, one that no longer had any power over him. True wealth isn't about the price tag on your car or the address of your home. It's not about controlling others or protecting a fragile image. True wealth is built, not bought. It's the skill in your hands, the integrity in your heart, and the legacy you build for those who come after you. It's the quiet satisfaction of a job well done and a life well lived, on your own terms. We all face our own Lorettas in life. People who try to diminish us to make themselves feel big. How have you built your own true wealth in the face of negativity? Share your story of triumph in the comments, and let's inspire each other to keep building.